right, let's go to question number 2, and I think that's with Kunal Khanna, who's, what is the time in Australia, Kunal, at the moment? Kunal?
Hi, sorry, it's actually 10 minutes to 12. Can you hear me now?
Oof, yeah. 10 to 12, and my God, should be asleep. Okay, go ahead, Kunal, shoot the question.
Hi, Milind. Thanks for coming over and answering all our questions. Look, I think my question was relating the urban poor and how IT can actually lift them from poverty and how it can actually act as a catalyst in doing so, and if and whether government is investing or encouraging entrepreneurship and investment in the same to solve that problem. But I think largely in the previous question you answered in part a lot of those things with the investment that you're making and the data revolution that you're encouraging. I just want to sort of draw from that what you just said and sort of take out another question from there going, you are encouraging the data revolution and you're trying to connect the rural people more better and giving them data and internet. But, you know, there's today people can't even feed themselves in India, and there's people are finding hard to survive. And what is the data going to do to them? What does it mean? People are not even educated. They're going to have mobile phones and they're going to have access to data, but how are they going to be able to use this for the benefit to actually make their lives better? That's the real question I would like you to expand on for me, please.
Thanks, Kunal. That's a very good question. We believe that the internet can offer a lot of services for people living in villages and rural areas. Whether you talk about telemedicine, you talk about online education, you talk about giving farmers access to markets. A lot of these services haven't really reached a stage from conceptualization towards fruition anywhere in the world, frankly. I've gone quite deep into this. And if you study the Latin American model or other developing countries, there aren't many applications that exist today which will really allow distance education to really be affordable. Now, what we are trying to do and look at it very holistically is that we are looking at the entire ecosystem that exists. And the ecosystem really has 3 parts. It has the distribution network, or the optical fiber network that we're rolling out, which is the broadband connectivity in the infrastructure. It has customer premise equipment, which is what is the device on which people will be accessing information. And lastly, it has the content or the applications. So we have seen in India that the customer premise equipment, the price of devices has come down substantially. That's largely come down because there's no import duty. But we are encouraging domestic manufacturing in the country. At the same time, which we believe will not only create employment in our country, but will also bring down the cost of this customer premise equipment. At the same time, a very critical element that exists is encouraging entrepreneurs to create content. The sector is called application service providers. What should incentivize them to create not just entertainment content, but utilitarian content like education, healthcare. Today in India, there's a unique scenario where if you download a ringtone, for instance, an entertainment-related product, the larger part of the revenue is going to the telecom operator. We want to reverse that. And the fact that we are investing in this network and that the government and the taxpayer, the citizen of India, will own this network, our aim is not to maximize profits. Our aim, of course, is to break even and do well. But that automatically will allow application service providers to retain a large part of the revenue for themselves. And that will be an inbuilt incentive for them to invest in these applications, which will actually empower the rural folk. If you look at a country like Japan, in India, for instance, an application service provider or a ringtone application maker keeps only 30% of the revenue, but 70% goes to the telecom operator. In Japan, it's the opposite. The telecom operator keeps only 30%. And therefore, it's incentivized a whole host of entrepreneurs to create this content, to create these applications. And that's something we are doing, which we believe will be very powerful, which will attract entrepreneurs in the future, and will actually build those applications which will be user-friendly for people living in villages, where they won't have to walk to the nearest hospital, which is many miles away in the city. They can benefit from a virtual classroom. And by bringing down the cost of that customer premise equipment, from which they can access those services, it will be very affordable for people in rural areas. The biggest problem today is not just infrastructure, it's also accessibility and affordability. So because we are owning that accessible part of it, we will ensure that it stays affordable. So I think in 5 to 7 years in India, Kunal, you will see people living in villages in India who have access and have this backhaul infrastructure completely empowered. And as I said, that maybe these applications don't exist in many parts of the world, but I believe that India will become a world leader in developing these applications. And I see no reason why Indian industry, entrepreneurs here can't develop the best applications to connect people living in distant villages to connect with the mainstream, to benefit from telemedicine, for instance, and why those entrepreneurs can't then go out to other countries and market those products. So we're really turning it around on its head, and we believe that in 5 to 7 years, India will not only demonstrate that we have the capabilities to connect our rural people, to bridge that digital divide, to ensure that they benefit from broadband, which is your question, but that we actually become a net exporter of these services. These services are actually Indian owned, the IP is owned by Indian entrepreneurs, and they are exporting it to countries and countries all over the world.
Okay, I think Kunal wanted to also ask a question which is about priority. I may be wrong, which is if they don't have food, are we wasting time focusing on things which perhaps are almost vulgar in a sense to people?
Can I restructure? Can I restructure?
Yeah. Go ahead, Kunal. Restructure, but no digging the nose in between. Go ahead.
I'm not done with it yet, but yeah, okay. I will. So thanks a lot for your answer, Milind. That's a really good initiative, and I'm sure it's going to make a lot of progress, giving a lot of access and healthcare access, and the accessibility is going to really increase through all that investment and the new initiatives through entrepreneurship in those areas. However, looking at the problem at a direct way, like where today 60% of India still it's completely dependent on farming. We all know how the farming sector in India is undergoing so many problems. So with this whole data, the availability, and encouraging people to develop applications to do ringtones, for example, that I'm sure that's one particular example that could be applied in several different ways that could be beneficial. But that again is sort of, in a way, choosing winners. People who are already educated, who are in a place and know how to develop these applications, that is usually in the cities. They are already well placed to do this through the know-how and all the education they have. Like looking at the 60% of the people who are still dependent on farming, they can't get to their everyday bread. They don't have technology to better go about their everyday activities, and they don't have enough money to feed themselves. So
yeah,
giving them
access. Can we just move it along? Sorry to interrupt you, but this is the longest question in the history of questions.
I'll try and respond very quickly. Kunal, I don't think it's an either-or argument. You can't say that because there are other problems in the country, we're not going to fix this problem. No one's saying don't connect villages by road. We're saying you should have better road connectivity. No one's saying don't have other schemes that benefit the rural poor. But telecommunications infrastructure, I believe, and we in the government and in this ministry believe, is very, very critical. It's very critical to improve productivity, to create economic activity in these rural areas. As I said in this example, the reason we're spending so much money to connect these Naxal affected areas is because we want those people to come into the economic and political mainstream. And we believe that while roads will allow them to do that physically, they can do that virtually through telecommunications infrastructure. So it's not really an either-or argument. We have to do both simultaneously, and the government is doing all these things together. But I'm focused on what we're doing with regards to the telecommunications space, and I can tell you that we are determined to connect rural India and ensure that rural India, that the digital divide that exists between urban and rural India is bridged as quickly as possible.